order this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors for the purpose of a retreat. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hipp?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Here.
All present.
Okay. We have 4 presentations this afternoon, and we're going to start with number 1, Economic Development. Amy Jordan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eisenhower, members of the Board of Supervisors. I believe that you all received one of these. This is the EDA's retreat notebook. I know Ms. Sadler received one at the retreat, and she was in attendance. This occurred in December, and so feel free to look through it at your leisure, and if you have any questions about it, please let me know, or Ms. Bledsoe, our EDA chair, would be happy to address those for you. We'll talk a little bit about some of what they discussed in the retreat as well, so you'll see as you, at a later point, go through that notebook, some similarities to that. So this is the Office of Economic Development. This is the mission statement. It's been the mission statement of OED for some time, was also included in the last comprehensive plan. But it's to foster the development and expansion of a diversified and healthy base of primary business and industry that will better balance the tax base, increase job opportunities, and enhance both the quality and standard of living in James City County. So when the EDA got together last December, they realized that they didn't have a mission statement. So that was one of the things that they decided they would tackle early on in the retreat. So you can see at the top, it includes their mission statement, which very closely reflects the mission statement of the Office of Economic Development in their efforts to support the same areas that the OED office is working on. They also recently adopted their appointed positions for this year, for this calendar year in 2019, so you can see those on the screen as well. And they talked about 3 other things at the retreat, which included workforce development and a discussion on incentives, as well as areas for strategic investment. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later on. So I wanted to include this because the perspective of the Office of Economic Development is a little bit different than some of the other departments within a locality. And so here we see our customers are corporate citizens. It's the business community. But that doesn't mean that we're not interested in the interest of our residents and our taxpayers, because they're our shareholders. So we kind of see a little bit like a business. So we have to answer to both, responsible for both. So you can see here on this slide the needs of the business community and how they really parallel the desires that the taxpayers and the residents would like to see in James City County. And this is our target market. Some of you have probably seen this before. This actually came from a Market Street study that was done by the 3 jurisdictions in the greater Williamsburg area back in 2016. And it did identify the targeted industries that we are focused on. There's 3 areas that we call our diversification industries. So those are areas that we're really looking for expansion. They include our advanced materials and components, our advanced manufacturing, our food and beverage industries, as well as our professional and technical services. Tourism and defense, they're still very important to us, but we look at those as sort of our legacy industry. So we want to make sure that we keep them stable and look for opportunities, but we are trying to diversify our market as well. So this is information that we received last fall from the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, VEDP. We had actually requested this information from them and compiled it because we were very interested in seeing what kind of requests they were receiving for business size. So as you can see, again, this is looking a little bit more at some of the manufacturing and commercial industry, some office. The sweet spot really is in the 100 to 300,000 square foot range. And so as we're thinking about site readiness and the product that we have, that number is very important. Again, that's not to say that the other sites aren't important and sizes are important as well, but there is a lot of demand in that area. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Oh, geez, technical difficulties here. All right. So this is our, based off of the assessed values of property within the county. Regarding the total property within the county, commercial and industrial makes up roughly 4% of total properties. Yet it accounts for 15% of the assessed value in the county. So you can see how important that value is, and the more commercial and industrial you add, the greater the percentage it takes into account of assessment. And keep in mind, this is just based off of the assessed values. This does not include machinery and tools, B-poll taxes, meals and sales taxes, other things that commercial businesses generate. So total commercial property in the county, the office and the retail are combined under commercial because it is the way that we include it for our values for assessment. But you can see between industrial and commercial, we have a total of 18.4 million square feet of commercial space. So that might seem like a lot. But then when you look at the next slide, this is our recent vacancy rates, and we pulled this back in December from CoStar. This compares us to the Hampton Roads region, and you can see that in just about every category, retail, office, and industrial, we are roughly half of what the vacancy rate is in the region. So there is not a lot of product on the market currently in any of those areas. Lease rates were much more on par with the region. Our retail's a little bit higher. We do have a lot of Class A and newer retail space, recent development in the last 10 to 15 years. We also, office is pretty close on par. The reason it's a little bit lower than the average is because large areas of office, such as the tech center, city center areas, as well as Virginia Beach Town Center, they tend to skew that number for the region to the higher end. So we're still very competitive in that area since we do have a mix of Class A and B office space. And industrial is very comparative as well. We have seen that number go just slightly up and down when we pull these reports. So we have some guiding policies that we look at as we're doing economic development. Of course, I've included the comp plan overarching goal for economic development, but I think what's really important to pay attention to is what the citizens and the participants in those community workshops said was important to them. And so some of the themes that came out during the last comp plan effort were the reutilization, rehabilitation of existing buildings and shopping centers, promoting redevelopment through incentive programs, identifying and promoting specific areas for redevelopment, creating shovel-ready development sites, and attracting businesses that are clean industries, have high-paying jobs, and promote green buildings. The other thing that was both came out in the community workshops as well as in the citizen survey is really the need for a skilled workforce and a technical workforce. And as you can see here, 90% of those in the 2014 citizen survey felt that expanding technical and workforce training opportunities was either somewhat important or very important. So our strategic plan, we kind of feel like in the Office of Economic Development, we sort of own goal 3. I mean, of course, there's 7 goals, and we touch all 7 of them in different ways. But there's a lot of things on this that our office is responsible for. So in bold, I've included some of those areas that we are really focusing our attention on within the Office of Economic Development. And that's not to say others aren't ongoing or that we're not involved in, but these are really the areas that we have been focused. One of those is looking at incentives, especially in the areas for entrepreneurs. Another is, of course, our focus on preparing shovel-ready sites. Of course, implementing the target industry study, conducting scenario planning. So again, we're starting to look at where are some areas that we could focus some of our strategic investment, as well as coordinating with our regional partnerships. So these are the current areas of focus for the Office of Economic Development. I'm going to go through a little, each one of these a little bit more detail. But right now, we're really focused on our product. Again, that is having ready sites, what is the highest and best use for property, helping to market what's out there, whether it's publicly owned or even privately owned. Entrepreneurship, again, this is helping with business innovation and our startups and small businesses. Workforce development, we're not only looking at what are the current needs of the workforce, but what will the future needs be. Strategic investment initiatives. This is an area that we're just starting to get into, but again, how can we focus our resources more strategically on infill and redevelopment strategies? And then again, our economic partnerships. So regarding product, there's here highlighted a few things that we have been involved in. One of those, again, is marketing available product as well as working with those owners, whether, again, it's the EDA or private business, on the best way to attract business. So some of the areas that we have been focused in, this is some, but doesn't include all, of course, is James River Commerce Center, Green Mountain Industrial Park, Quarter Path. There is a 14-acre site in Quarter Path that is James City County. Hankins Industrial Park, there is one site left in that property. Stonehouse, we do have a building getting ready to come online out there, and there's a few small infill areas. And then an area that we kind of talk about a future opportunity is the Hazelwood property. Tiering. So VEDP, the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, they have what they call a tiering strategy, and it's basically a grading system for properties, a state-based system, and it basically shows how ready they are for development. So our goal is to always try to get those properties to a 4 or a 5. We have actually gone through some tiering exercises and had several sites tiered within the county. Most of those are only at a 2 or a 3, and some of them a 1. We do have a couple that are, at a 4, but again, we have some work to do in order to get more 4s and 5s. Preparing the EDA properties as shovel-ready sites. That is, again, an important one. These are some of the activities. It doesn't include all of them that we have recently worked on with our Economic Development Authority. We've delineated wetlands. We have purchased, we're proceeding currently with purchase of some mitigation credits. We've developed drainage plans. We're starting to do some updated survey work. We've developed conceptual site plans, and we're working on some infrastructure improvements out there. And then we're also thinking about what other site readiness resources are out there. And these are just 2 examples, but the state has a Commonwealth Opportunity Fund, which is if a business is coming into the market, sometimes if it meets certain thresholds, the state is willing to provide an incentive to the business. But that fund requires a 50% match to the from the locality, so it has to be a shared cost. 100% match, but a 50-50 shared cost in that. The VEDP Site Readiness Grant, that is another one. That match can come from either public, and this year they've allowed private resources. But again, these are things that will help with some of that site readiness and infrastructure for sites that meet their criteria. And again, having those pots ready, really does help to move it forward. So. Entrepreneurship. So another area of focus, again, Start Peninsula, for those that aren't familiar with it, this was I can't remember what year this was, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th year for Start Peninsula, but it's basically the 6 peninsula jurisdictions, their EDAs sponsor that. And this year we actually had a Launchpad client that was able to pitch to an angel investor and has the ability to maybe take advantage of up to $100,000 worth of angel investment funding. So that was very exciting, but it even touched some of our Launchpad clients. And then Launchpad, that is our regional business incubator, as you're familiar with. This actually says currently has 16 clients. Since I did this presentation last week, it's now at 100% occupied, so no longer 91%, which is great news. And we've had a lot of work that we've done in this area recently in partnership with William and Mary as well. And then our technology zone, this is, we've talked a little bit about this previously, but we're going to bring more information forward to you on this. We had a good, healthy discussion about it in the EDA retreat, and it's a new incentive program that we'll be working on this year. Workforce development. So I think many of y'all, if not all of you, have had the opportunity to participate in our Manufacturing Day. This has been a model program that other localities in the region have looked at how James City County is doing this. So we have done a really great job with it, and I really should give most, if not all, the credit to my counterpart here, Kate Sipes, who's really developed that through the years. But it has touched over 500 students that have toured through 9 employers in the county, giving them greater exposure to our manufacturing opportunities in the county. Chefs Go, that was a unique collaborative between the school systems, Thomas Nelson, the EDAs, as well as some other regional partners in the area of culinary arts. But what's really important about it is that has now led to a new development that we just created, which is our Workforce Development Resource Team. We just started this past fall, and it is a collaboration between Thomas Nelson, the school system, both our OED staff, as well as 2 members of the EDA, and we are working on some very exciting things. Right now, a healthcare Workforce Summit, which is planned at Legacy Hall in March 2019. So we'll send you more information about that. And after that, we would like to model that and do a similar summit for our manufacturing sectors and our trade sectors. And then we're starting to do some more collaboration with our social services office. They have a program or a couple programs that we're looking at for some of our employers that will help place some of their unemployed or underemployed clients into these businesses. A strategic investment area. So again, this is something new that we're just starting to explore, but with the emphasis on trying to focus our resources in areas that we can have a great impact. The Grove District is something that has been very important to us and our discussion, especially because there is a lot of opportunity there. Again, I've mentioned James River Commerce Center and Greenmount Industrial Park with the future Skiffs Creek Connector coming through there. Some Route 60 improvements that are getting ready to occur. So there's a lot of opportunity still there. Most recently, Grove was actually designated what is called an opportunity zone. And although that does not require any local resources, incentive resources per se, it's strictly a federal program. It allows investors to put capital gains or unrealized capital gains into an investment in an opportunity zone. It is something that we're really pushing and marketing because it could help to stimulate other things. But we know that alone is not enough. So we are looking at other strategic ways that we can improve this area. And so we'll be bringing more forward on that as well. And then our partnerships. Again, I've mentioned several of these already, but we have our Regional Economic Development Marketing arm, the Greater Williamsburg Partnership. Of course, our chamber, as well as our tourism. And I know we're trying to get away from those terms. I don't know that they've come up with our, the new logos, but more of our business council and our tourism council. The Thomas Nelson Community College, again, is a huge partner for us, and we are working more and more with them continuously, especially in the areas of workforce development. Our school system is just as important a player in that role. William and Mary, and then, of course, Launchpad, our incubator. And then, as y'all are very familiar with, the recent adoption of the Eastern Virginia Regional Industrial Facility Authority. So that brings us to the end. I'll be happy to answer any questions that y'all have. And
Love that photograph.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I can't remember where we stole it. I'm sure Laura found it for me at some point in time.
I've got a few. Out of the prospects for buildings, 100,000 to 300,000. Mm-hmm. Can you define that? Which is the hotter out of, say, 100, 200, or 300?
I think we can go back and look at those numbers because I think that we have them all on a spreadsheet where we could probably break that down a little bit more. So I'd have to do a little bit, hone in a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know because if we, if 100 or 150 mm-hmm. is the sweet spot, mm-hmm. When we plan and look at things, it may want to be something that we want to, concentrate on that one number. Rather than going to a 200 and mm-hmm. somebody say, well, it's too big for me.
Right.
Right. Try to find the sweet spot.
And I think with that, if it's developable acreage, and it's not sort of an awkwardly shaped site, thinking about those 10 to 15, no more than 20 acre sites are really good. But again, that's developable acreage. Sometimes you have other elements that, might make it more, difficult to develop a site. So.
Okay. And then it was good to see that, the commercial and industrial, how little the piece of the pie is and how much it produces mm-hmm. at that. So if we can expand that, we can expand the value in that whole thing a long way. So that was good to see. That's good information. I see where and that's a tough job. Your guiding policies, community workshop is, reworking all the old buildings and trying to get those back online. And that's, that's always a tough thing to do because, branding and everything else, somebody wants to have their new building and their look and their style and all that. And I understand the citizens, let's try to get these buildings utilized. And that's always a tough thing to try to take somebody who has a specialty building or a specialty design and say, hey, we can try to remodel. Because sometimes remodeling and redoing those spaces are a lot more expensive than building a whole new space. So that's a tough one for y'all to try to figure out, and that's going to take some time to figure that one out. Right here. Okay, the current area of focus on product and all that, you may want to add into that the Taylor property. That's an ideal piece of property to, it's close to the intersections and easy in and out, full ways to get in and out of that property. So it might be. And I know Bob Crum has done a lot in the tiering, and I'm sure y'all probably worked with him as far as what is available. I know I've been working with Bob, and he's been looking more at the south side. I said, there's a whole lot up here. And he's looking for the larger mega sites.
Right.
And I said, Bob, you can't just look at one. And so he's kind of starting there. But I said, you got to look at the other sites because there's a lot of value in James City County and some of the sites we have. We're not there 100%, but I'm trying to get Bob on his side to say, hey, look at these smaller sites because there's a lot of people that want those. Not necessarily can you hit that one home run. We hit, 3 bases, we can make it home. So,
and I think that point's very important, especially when you look at the VEDP slide and where the requests are actually. And so, even though they've been focused on larger sites, and it's not to say that they're not important,
right?
But that there is definitely a demand for those mid-size sites.
And some of those sites, one site he's looking at, if it's developed in 20 or 40 years, you would be lucky. Right. It's in a deadlock with the town and the people and everything else. Well, I told him, I said, you just don't concentrate on the big stuff. Look at the little stuff that all the communities have. And
I will say, I think that, James City County's been a little bit ahead of the game in some of the tiering efforts. Yep. So currently, again, with focus on the big sites, there was only one property, I think, that really rose that they're taking a look at in the HRPDC study. Right. But shortly before I got here, Jason had worked with Kate and Timmons, and they did some tiering of some other sites. And then we worked with VEDP, GWP, and I did last year on some for Hazelwood to get that done. And so we're most of our sites that are larger have already been that. Now we need to focus on the next size down.
Yeah. Because I think we've got a lot more to offer than they may realize. And I just want to make sure we get that out there. And I know we've talked about, on the shovel-ready sites, water and sewer. And I'm trying to get that out there and the cost and what that is and what we have to bear. Site readiness resource. You talked about the grants that may be there. Is that a grant? If we were to do, like was been done in the past, a shell building, or have the site ready for a building to come in, would that be a grant that James City County could do, or do we need to have an interested private partner that would come in and take over the site, or is that something that we can apply for that grant, even though we'd have to give 100% match? We get 50% of the money that we'd have to put in as a grant in order to get a site ready. Is that a possibility?
We can apply, and the one challenge, and again, this is similar to the Bob Crum study, is that they do have a acreage threshold. So currently, it has to be sites that are 100 acres or greater, contiguous. So we haven't been able to use it for properties like James River Commerce Center. But we did recently work with the ownership in Greenmount on an application. But that wasn't including, at this point, any kind of public funding. It is something that has had limited funding from the state in the past. This past year, I think they only set aside about $1 million for it, and I think they got over $4 million in requests. But this coming year, I do know in talking with VEDP that the governor has put quite a bit more in that budget. And so I'm hopeful that next year they'd be able to actually meet all the site readiness requests that come forward, because that is a big focus for the state as well, to move properties forward and get them so that anyone looking in this area is, basically when a company's looking, and some of this, these studies have been done, but they want to be able to execute within 2 to 9 months. I mean, most of them want to be within a building within 9 months. And so if you don't have a site that you can turn dirt tomorrow or a shell all ready to go, that you're eliminated pretty quickly in that process.
And that's what we're getting down there. We're not ready. We could be ready.
Right.
It takes money to be ready.
Right.
And I was wondering if any of these grants would help us to get to that site to a more desirable state so that we could move quicker on it.
Yeah, and they could, some of the property that is in that area, as well as some of the property in the northern end of the county, can utilize that funding as well, as long as it meets that criteria. And the Commonwealth Opportunity Fund, that is one that is more when you have the prospect and they're ready to come and you're trying to create something that closes any gap that would land them here.
Okay. All right. And is there, I'm sure there probably is there a scale or a grading on like SMART scale? You have to, this, and this in order to get the grant? Or is it
There is a criteria and application. I don't know, again, how when they review those applications, where weight is sometimes given. I think, again, it's discretion of the state office, and there might be some times that they're focused in a region when they have limited funds. They're, if there is a property that has a prospect waiting in the wings, usually then that's going to push it to a more elevated position. So it just, again, depends on, there's a lot of moving parts.
Now, we can, TPO, is there anything that we can do as far as if we get sites ready that, we can have a vote there and get a letter and get that on our side? And, some of these other groups that I'm involved with, I don't mind talking to Bob and saying, hey, if this letter will help us and push us in front of somebody, let me know. And, I'll put it to the group and then see if we can utilize the regional power to help us with some of our projects.
I always think that's important. The more that we can have as far as the support, especially from elected officials, is extremely important, especially throughout the region. So that never hurts. And we did, again, I mentioned Greenmount. We had some of our local state senators that actually wrote letters of support and for that project as well.
So if we can do anything in the regional groups, let me know, and we can or you can call Bob direct, and just keep me in the loop so that I can push it through the committees. I'd be glad to. I think that was collaboration on the workforce development. I'm glad to see that. That's where we've always been trying to get to, and I'm glad to see that's coming together, and everybody's trying to work together for the same thing, and that's extremely important. That's going to get us over that hump of trying to figure out how we get this workforce and keep it in James City.
And a lot of it is connecting the dots. For example, Thomas Nexon, as well as even social services, realize we are sort of that connection to the business community, but they also have the connection to the programs and opportunities, and so we're bridging those gaps.
Yeah, so. That's great. Thank you.
So, can I just ask a question? First of all, thanks for the information. I think it was very helpful to get a good sense of where you see priorities and what kind of strategies you're pursuing. And I guess what I was most interested in is if you could identify in the last couple of years what the fruits of that effort has been. In other words, have we had the kind of successes that are driven by those efforts that would show us that's the right path to be following?
I believe so. I mean, some of these things we've more recently started. For example, the collaboration team, and we had some information and opportunities, but we were trying to or highlights of things that we've accomplished, but we wanted to, be respectful of your time today. But that is a more recent effort that we're working on. But again, pointing back to the Chef's Go, we've seen a lot of great outcomes from that. We've had a lot of students that have gone on to culinary school. I believe every student that's come through that program has now ended up with a job offer locally. And so our site Readiness, we actually already have 2 sites that there are prospective interest in. So in James River, again, we still got a lot of work to do, but I feel very, I don't want to jinx it, but excited about those opportunities moving forward. And so hopefully we'll be able to present more information to you on those here in the next few months. So.
One of the things I think we can do a little better on giving you some numbers on what we think, because I do think you have some successes. The challenges being number 2 doesn't count, even though that speaks very well for the community. You don't get quite as many public wins that way. But I do think Amy and her staff are doing a good job of meeting with existing industries, following up with them. And again, I do think their efforts are working well for James City County. It's just until you have that new announcement, that's what people like to see and hear. We've not had a lot of those, but I think you'll have some things to talk about in the future.
And we've had, I didn't include it in any of this, but, another example, just thinking off the top of my head, Owens, Illinois, we've worked with them very closely recently, and we've identified some areas where they were having a hard time getting some of the materials that they need. And so we have connected them with the Port of Virginia and helped them with getting resources and some additional incentives there. We're working with the EDP on some other opportunities with them. And so again, it's reaching out to those businesses and finding sometimes where they have a need. And we had conversations back and forth with Anheuser-Busch and OI, and recently OI was able to get the bottle glass back to Anheuser-Busch, and so that was a really big, opportunity and kind of win to be able to get that back there. And so we've been, again, trying to connect all of those dots and pull those things together. So.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to have you think about tracking as we go forward is changes in wage rates and ways in which employers are making efforts to encourage development of their employees so that they can move up. We're going to have a presentation later on today on workforce housing, and to me it seems like one of the major issues there is simply that wages are very low in the area. In a major portion of our economy, and without changes in that, it's very difficult to really get any handle on things like affordable housing. Just kind of encouraging businesses to think about these things and maybe see if there are some ways in which we can provide them with forum or opportunities to develop plans to allow workers to increase their skill levels and move forward. And I know you're doing some of that with community college, but it's got to be something that moves beyond just the initial placement and into advancement of folks to higher paying positions, more skilled positions.
Mr. Chairman of the Board, are there areas that we're not focused on that you'd like us to be? Are there average wage requirements you want to think? I mean, the broad categories of these diversification opportunities that Amy talked about, I assume, have been discussed before, and they're good areas, I think. But do you have any other particulars of what you want to see in terms of, you mentioned wage, so do we want them sort of, we'll work with anybody. I guess the bottom line, we work with anybody that comes in and tries to locate, but where we really spend a lot of time and effort ought to be with the types of companies and things that you want us to bring into the community. So are there particulars there or things you want to think about to help us know where you want to go as a board?
Well, one thing, I think Chef's Go is a great program. I'd like to know numbers. In wage-wise, that's probably not a job that is going to pay a considerable amount of money. I mean, I do think it's important, and especially in the hospitality industry, but, maybe having Amy talk to us about, is that where we need to be putting our energy, or do we need to be putting it in something to Supervisor McGlennon's point that is over on the workforce housing side, where the skill set, we know, we've heard from JCSA, we've got a issue there. Is that someplace where Amy and Kate can help as well, working with Thomas Nelson to see about getting a program and training the workers that we're going to need there, which is, you know we may not be paying there what we should, but a little higher pay there, you know, so it would be helpful maybe to get some of that kind of information, what you all think direction we need to be going in as far as what's going to help with the best wage earning potential.
I think if
for me,
we expand on that too, the not only the service authority but the county employees as well, as far as recruiting and training, and you know what way can we? Because we always look outside. Sometimes we get to look inside, and you know, what are we doing and what we can do. Economic development, developing our own people too as well, and bringing those on board in James City County, and the service authority is low on people, and trying to get those skilled laborers in there. And of course, there's always a cost to everything. I mean, if your wage goes up, then the cost of everything else goes up with it, and you're back to the same balance you were before. Now that I'm paying so much here, now I can't afford that. So it's a tricky line, you know, to try to figure out.
it is.
I wish somebody smarter than me could figure the whole thing out.
Sorry, I just had a couple things, but if you're not finished.
I was just going to say one thing in terms of what Ms. Stevens was asking about, is a dead horse that I've been beating for a while, is trying to see if there are some opportunities for us in energy retrofits for both residential and commercial purposes. We have a lot of folks who've been involved in the construction industry over the years here, and if you know, new home construction isn't quite as robust as it was at an earlier point in time, finding a valuable employment opportunity and something that actually could be exported beyond James City County into the Hampton Roads region more generally would be, I think, very useful if we could have ways of encouraging training people in energy retrofits that could then go out and help homeowners figure out how to better insulate their homes, better reduce their utility costs, and businesses as well. And then that's something that also, for other communities in Hampton Roads, there might be a market for those services from
And it's amazing. LED, phone, HVAC units. It is incredible the amount of savings you can save per month on electricity and fuel and everything else. And the technology's out there. It's not, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's just how you use it, because houses are changing, and it can be applied right to the commercial side of it as well, and save a tremendous amount of money for not only that company, but you know, our fuel consumption worldwide. And so there's a lot of things you can do out there now that it's incredible. There's a lot.
You have some additional?
I do. Well, and Michael covered a lot. But you know, one thing I hear about too is the empty shop buildings, and somehow we got to do a good job of getting the word out that we can't force somebody that's looking for a round building to go into a square space. And you know, so you know, I don't think I think I asked, actually, we've approved very few new shopping centers recently. Right. So, you know, retail's changing. That's nothing, you know, we didn't create Amazon. We may use it, but we didn't create it. So, so I think that's something that we need to continue to talk about as well. And then Manufacturing Day, which is just, I think, just been a really great program. Wonder if if the school system has ever gone back and followed up on that. Are there people that, as a result of that, students that look at that as a career and
utilize it
and come back? And you know, I know we've had, when we've gone to Print Pack, there's been people who were Jamestown, but I don't know if that was a result of Is there any way to talk to the high school counselors about possibly trying to do a follow-up to see if anybody considers manufacturing after participating in this program, or
Yeah, Kate might be able to speak a little more to that. I mean, I think part of the challenge is once they graduate, being able to still track where those students are after they leave high school.
yeah, and they should. I know they were working on some sort, but maybe we could follow up and ask on that. Just because I do really think that I mean, if it is nothing more than exposing people to, you know, there is value in that for sure. I would just like to know from employers too, have they seen some WJCC students that they've employed who have started out with the manufacturing day? So, thank you.
Sue?
Yeah, thank you, Amy, for this presentation. I appreciate it. I did attend Manufacturing Day, and it was fascinating, to say the least. I was glad to hear that Owens, Illinois is getting some of their issues worked out. I was wondering if you could contact me in the near future and just give me a more specific update on what is going on out there, so that I can stay on top of it. And also out at Hankins, what is it? Is it a pad-ready site that we have out there, or what is it that?
So there is one property. It's owned by George Knight's. It's adjacent to their property.
Next door. Okay.
And it is, I believe, about a Tier 4, and it is. It could hold, I think, either 100 to 150,000 square foot of space, either contiguous or broken into smaller buildings.
Okay. And what's the infrastructure situation out there with that?
Last time I had spoken with them, I know that there was an issue they were working through with VDOT, and then they needed to put in a stormwater pond. But I think that, and that the VDOT thing might have been resolved by now, so I'll have to call back up. But it's pretty ready to go. Yeah. So, good. And we've included it in marketing materials when we've had prospects. If that is the size that they're looking at, we include that site in there as well.
Okay, great. So. Great, very good. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
And I've got just a couple of things. We talked about, the workforce training. I know we've had culinary and we've had healthcare, which is a big one through Thomas Nelson. But when we're talking about manufacturing, the Workforce Development Board has really been partnering with the Thomas Nelson down in the Lower Peninsula, specifically focused on like Cannon. There's tremendous demand for training for folks in Cannon. I'd like to see us reach out to the Workforce Development Board to include them with Thomas Nelson in our schools up here, if you can, to see if we can help focus a little bit more of our effort on the manufacturing process. They're a resource we have and that I don't think we've really used very well so far. Michael and I had a lunch with Robin Bledsoe, and we discussed this at that. I was very happy with the way the EDA is focusing on the mission and a very coherent plan that they put together. One of the things I would come back to, Mr. Stevens, is in my time on the board, I think the hardest part is how do you measure success? And I'm not totally sure that I have any real concrete suggestions to offer you right now, but I think that's one of the things I'd like staff to look at is if we set some goals for what we want to do in economic development, how can we measure whether or not we've made progress for that next year at this time? Right. So that I would urge you and staff to take a look at that and see what you think is a reasonable way to measure what we're trying to accomplish.
We'll work on that. It's okay.
That's all I had on it. If everybody, is there any other conversation on this? Because we're a little behind schedule. We need to move to the next issue.
If I could mention two quick things. One is the Hampton Roads EDA. You've been a member of that before. Mm-hmm. We're not a member currently. They are trying to reinvigorate. Quite frankly, where Williamsburg, York, and I feel we shouldn't be part of that, but I at least want to make you aware of that today, that we can always join at a later date. I do want to talk about the goals or the Greater Williamsburg Partnership in a few moments, and so that's where I would say we focus our efforts, but I just want to make sure you as a board had heard they are reforming that. If you want to be part of that, we could be. It's not where I would be as a staff person yet. So I just want to make you aware of that opportunity.
Okay. Our next presentation. Thank you again, Mr. Jordan. Really appreciate that. A lot of good material here to look at. Our next presentation will be on land preservation. Jason Purse.
Happy to be back. We've had a couple of discussions about land preservation, in particular the Purchase of Development Rights Program. So back in June of this year, the board had asked for just a general update on where we were with the program in general, and we had said that since there wasn't a lot of active funding, that not much had happened with it. The last time we had entered into an agreement for a PDR was back in 2016 on Fentanyl Road and on Forge Road, and then we had a joint proposal before that between Green Space and PDR on Neckaland Road back in 2014. Those were the last ones that we had really worked on. The program wasn't gone, but it just, like I said, it wasn't active. So the board had asked us what we might be able to do to sort of reinvigorate that. And when we came forward with the strategic plan update in October, we talked about how we envision staff having an operational initiative to sort of get these programs re-energized again. So we were going to take more of an all-inclusive approach where we included the Agricultural and Forestal District program, the Purchase of Development Rights program, and then the Green Space program, along with some of our zoning ordinance regulations, in order to make sure that folks knew sort of where we were in terms of land preservation opportunities. Really, I think the first thing we need to do is re-engage that PDR committee. There's been sort of some different time expectations that I think folks were a little frustrated with as it related to the PDR program in general. So really working with that committee to get folks to understand that if you're looking for a real time-sensitive program, it's probably not the PDR program, but that's not a negative for the program. That's just something that folks need to know is out there. So we wanted to put together some documentation so folks would really understand the different programs and what their limitations were. Right, because we really have to make sure that the landowners understand that this is voluntary and what their participation would mean. So just to cover for folks who might be watching the Agricultural and Forestal District program, that's sort of a short-term preservation program where the landowner commits to not developing for a certain amount of time. It's usually about 4 years per the district, and then you get some tax relief based on that. The PDR program is sort of the in-between one. It's the landowner keeps the piece of property, but sort of sells the development rights to the county or a conservation organization. And then the Green Space program had been where the county would buy a piece of property. So it's sort of a tiered approach to how we might be able to work on preservation with the different landowners. So the next part, and maybe the more important part for you all today, is to start thinking about the funding options. We had talked about how the Purchase of Development Rights program had a little bit of funding in it, a little over $365,000, but probably not enough to really engage with more than one property owner. And quite frankly, that might not even be enough at this point. So if you're interested in pursuing additional properties for PDR, we're probably going to have to talk about that. The AFD program doesn't require any upfront costs. It can result in a reduced property tax through the land use valuation program through Richard Bradshaw's office. And then the Green Space we don't have dedicated funding for, but you'll remember from our conversation during the budget last year that the board had set aside $1.3 million a year as a part of the tourism money that was for land banking or general CIP needs. So if something was to arise, we would have the ability to consider that funding source for Green Space. So really that's where we are. Like I said, I think we have an operational plan, and we're going to be looking to you all for maybe more of the funding information side of things. I think over the next 6 months, and then as we start the FY20 operational side, staff is well prepared to sort of undertake sort of the documentation creation and the re-engaging the PDR program. But we'll look to you for some discussion about the funding side, I think now.
Questions?
Yeah.
Okay. The length of time for PDR, that stays on for the entirety. Didn't we do a few at the very front, like a 20-year? Is there one or two out there?
I think there's one or two out there that have a buyback provision, but it's pretty specific. It's not a straight buyback. You have to provide a similar piece of property, and then you can buy it back.
Swap.
Yeah,
Okay.
a swap, essentially.
Okay. And then there's opportunity also for private partnership for funding or if we don't have the funding, we can send them down another avenue for a private partnership that we may be able to get in touch with, that we can say, hey, we can't do this option right now.
Absolutely.
But you can do it through this private partnership and come out with about the same thing that we're trying to look for.
We have a great relationship with our local land conservancy, and I'm sure they'd be willing to sit down with us and talk about some of those opportunities.
Okay. How can we take the PDR and the green space and combine them into a new
land preservation.
Category.
I think it's a part of a toolbox, right? I think what we need to do is we need to let folks know that those programs are out there. I think they are two distinct programs. You'll remember that when I first brought this to you in June, we talked about if we want to apply for certain funding, the VDAX funding, we have to have a PDR-specific program. We have to have a set of regulations on how we evaluate PDRs. We have to have the PDR committee, and we have to be able to review it under those guidelines in order to qualify for that funding. The green space program has always been a little more flexible. So if somebody comes and approaches us, we don't necessarily have to go through that PDR committee to enter into a contract to purchase the piece of property, but we would have to do it if it was a part of the PDR program. So I think that needs to be a separate process, but what we can do is we can have a pamphlet of information that is available that we can engage with these landowners and say, hey, we have a PDR program. This might be best for you if you don't want to sell your property. If you want to continue to live on your property and farm your property, or whatever the case may be, it takes a little longer. You know, we have to go through X, Y, and Z as a part of the process, but at the end, that might be what works for you best. We can also give them the option of considering the sale of their property to us, which might be a shorter time frame, would also cost us more money. So I don't necessarily think that the names themselves need to change. I think we need to present it as we have a couple different options for how you can handle your piece of property based on what your ultimate outcome and needs are, but they can still have the separate names. We can still have a PDR and a green space as long as it's part of an open space preservation toolbox, essentially.
Now the AFD, what are the sizes? I know it go up to anything, but what does it start at?
So a district, for there to be a district, you have to have 200 acres. For you to add on to that district, you have to have 20 acres of timber or 5 acres of agricultural farmed land, and it has to be within a mile of that core district.
I think that the PDR served us well when it was moving forward, and we put it on the shelf just to get our finances and straight. And we didn't kill it. We just said, right now let's get our finances in the county straight. I think we're to the point right now where our finances are in better shape, and thanks to staff and everything they do in keeping us on our budgets and what we need to do, that we can possibly start looking at. Now, with a PDR program, and we're keeping green space, and I don't know if it can work. This is probably Adams, would be Adams. The Senate bill for tourism, can any of those fundings be applied to protect corridors coming into our area for tourism?
It's something I probably ought to look through a little bit more thoroughly before answering at this meeting. I don't want to. You don't need to answer it now, but I'm just thinking, that funding, somebody wants to come to the area and they see how beautiful it is, and you protect that beauty coming into that area.
That's enhancing tourism.
Without any research, I'd tell you yes.
And the state's been very supportive of agritourism. They've been very interested in promoting opportunities for folks to participate in farms and to come and be a part of that. So I would agree with that. I mean, looking at it, I would think that we could.
So then we've got the 365. We've got the 1.3 million. And we've got this tax that we may be able to bring into some of this money in to help start this program. But
that's the money that we don't control. That's the Tourism Council money.
No, just the other half. The half we get.
Oh.
Well, that's the 1.3 million is part of that.
That's the 1.3 million in the green space.
It's not in green space.
It's not in green space.
It's in what we call land banking.
It was part of the money that we allocated last year that's coming through the sales tax, our half penny of the sales tax.
So it's not money set aside in the green space account.
You remember when we were talking last year with money about do we give a penny back?
Yeah.
And the answer was that we decided no, we weren't going to give the penny back in tax relief.
Right.
But we took that money, which was represented, and banked it.
Right.
And the idea was that was a resource we could use for down payment on building of a school, or any other capital thing we wanted to do. And I think we've got most of that money, obviously for the next year, pretty well tied up the same way. We would then have the opportunity the following year when we go into the new biennium to determine what we were going to do with that 4.5 million a year, because what we did last time was we decided we were going to put it on one-time issue, not build it, cook it into the budget, put it on one-time things. Yep. So this would be an opportunity to set aside some money, I think, but I don't think we're going to really have an opportunity to do that for at least another year. Yeah, but that one is more than 1.3, isn't it? And for that tax?
Yes.
It's 4.5.
Yes, but there were other ways.
But we had already committed the others to the 2 years worth of bringing up the police and the fire.
Okay, and that left us with the 1.3. But that's not a separate, I was thinking we had another 1.3 in green space.
I wish we did.
Yeah, I was like, okay, now we can. Okay, I was like 2.6 already and moving forward.
Yeah, so I'm going to just, I think we're all on a continuum on this particular issue. I feel a sense of urgency that we have pressures for development still on some critical land that we really ought to be thinking about preserving. And so what I'm hoping that we would get out of this in the short term would be some information about what the financial implications are for a borrowing. We did borrow money in order to make purchases back in the last decade, and we didn't get very far with that because of the Great Recession, but there was a lot of support for it, and what we'd really be thinking about is, so how much would we need annually in order to make a significant PDR green space program viable?
Sure, I'm going to go back one slide, and then I'll defer to Adam and Sue if they want to add on the mechanics of that. I think Sue would agree that before we go out and actually acquire that money, what we really need to do is establish the criteria for the prioritization of our goals, right? Yeah. What are we trying to accomplish with this? I think some of the, I don't want to say confusion, but some of the issue that we've had with PDRs in the past are there are a lot of different competing pieces of property. Some of them are view shed protection. Some of them, like the Gilly property, are about preventing those development rights, and then some of them are about farmland preservation. So I think we need to work with the PDR committee and with the board to sort of establish those goals, so that way when we get the money in, we're sure that we know which properties to go out and to target, or what sort of things we're trying to accomplish with all of that money. So I think I 100% agree with you. I think a good first step is to really work with the PDR committee to try to work on that prioritization in terms of maybe ranking and those sorts of things, and then come back to you and let you know what types of pieces of property are out there, and that might be able to inform you all a little more about what sort of funding needs we have.
And I would be I'd more look at setting aside X amount per year than borrowing. I never like to borrow unless we have to. I know we have to at times, but I like to, look at setting aside X amount to move it.
Okay. Bruce?
Can you refresh our memory on, have we been approached?
Yeah, I think historically we have been approached by property owners. I would say in the last 2 years, as folks have heard that the board is interested in it, we've probably had 3 or 4 property owners come forward and express their interest in it. Whether it's PDR or green space, they have asked whether or not we think it's going to be funded here in the next year.
Okay, all right.
Sue?
You mentioned zoning as an option for being able to do some of this. How could you just explain how that works, and maybe with the comp plan update, how that could coordinate with all of this?
Yeah, I think the board has set an ordinance in the past on how development can occur in the rural lands, and part of that has been about preservation of the property. We have community character corridor buffers that require, for major subdivisions, 150 feet of undisturbed buffer at the front of a subdivision. We have minimum zoning district lot sizes, so 3 acres in the rural lands. Something the board could consider would be larger lot sizes as a way to limit the impact of development. So those are all things that we could consider, and particularly as a part of the comp plan.
Just as a side note, with the importance of the community character and the corridors that we have, with talking about preserving farmland and that sort of thing, I think something that I hear a lot from folks is even just the upkeep of some of the areas like medians and things like that between trash and landscaping and whatever. If that's an important issue for folks, then that's something that we should consider. I know that's not part of land preservation, but it kind of goes along with that whole concept of if we're going to be talking about putting money towards making it pretty when we drive into the area, we could at least make sure we've got funding for trash pickup and some of these medians like 199 that as you go from York County to James City, it just kind of stops. So just a side note.
I had one approach that I'd like to maybe focus a little bit more on, and that is, in the past, we have sat and waited for people to come to us. To me, this program, if we're going to use it effectively, has to work the other way. We have to look at the county and determine what is it we want to try to preserve. Is it and go out and actively look at it and determine, okay, here's what we want to do. And then we have the tools. We can do this one with green space. We can maybe buy the development rights here. Maybe we can put this in an AFD, But we've never had a master plan. It's always been sort of hit and miss, and we're receptive to people, but we didn't go out and try to shape what we're doing. We may approach somebody with a piece of property that we'd really like to protect. They're not interested in it. That's part of the risk we have. But rather than sitting and waiting for folks maybe who have property that we're really not that interested in, and just because it's there, we are having to consider it, that I think we need to change our focus a little bit. And we can't do that unless we have some funding and some staff. Because in the past, we've done this with part-time folks and volunteer committees, and I don't think that that's going to work very well. So if we're really serious about doing this land preservation, I think it's going to require some commitment on resources and staff to be able to organize and to manage this. And then when we want to go take those steps, whether we set aside money in the budget for it or whether we borrow money, those are decisions we can make down the line. But we need to be able to put funding forward. But I'm not ready to do that until we have really sort of focused on what it is that we'd like to preserve and have a more active program. If that sort of puts my point across to you as to what I'm really looking for in the whole process.
Is that something that we would do during the comp plan update? As far as determining what land we would.
I don't think we can wait that long, to be quite honest with you. I share a little bit of John's concern about the urgency of it. And it may not be that we have a whole lot of resources to put on it right away, but I think we need to start focusing that way. And then the board needs to consider in next budget if we want to put some money toward it to expand and to cover, the program that we would like to sort of shape. But I would have to defer to the realities of the budget here when we get into that.
Yeah, I would think, a few things I heard about the program is it took too long.
Yeah.
I think we need to streamline it. If we're going to do it, we need to do it and get it done and go, you know what, it's going to take 6 months to go from A to Z. That's it, done. Through the board, through everything, instead of dragging on and dragging on. That's what I heard from a lot of people. And it wasn't one person's fault. It was once again, we didn't have a roadmap to where we were going.
Right.
And to try to concentrate our efforts in one area. I'll go back to Forge Road. I love Forge Road. And we've got a lot of them in Forge Road. We got a chance to really protect that area up in there for future generations and then give the people the options that they need, because for sale signs up there right now, and options that they need and in order to keep development from encroaching onto that road. As far, I don't mind a small, couple houses. I don't want to see 300 or 400. And I know development will be a certain point, and there'll be 3 or 4 houses here and there, but I don't want to see, 500, 200 houses in a section, and because that'll ruin the look of the entire road. And I think it's an important road for us to look at, one of our most important, and so we got so much invested in it now that would be, an ideal place to start. But time is the biggest thing I heard was.
Well,
I think,
go ahead, Ruth.
To your point, it would help to, then do we put all resources to Forge Road? How do we, I do think there has to be some plan.
Well, and this is what I was driving at, was if we had a staff developed toolbox and people for a program, whether it's Forge Road or whether it's somewhere else, you have the ability to say, okay, this is a piece of property we want to buy. That one we want to put in green space. Okay, we'll just put this one in AFD. That you can make an approach to the owners on a different basis based on what you want to try to do and the money we have. Because, you rank order the priorities, and if you only got so much money, there's things you'd like to do that you may not be able to do because of physical constraints. But you have to target it, and I think it has to start with staff. As I said before, this program has always been a very loosely run program, and it's been relied on part-time people, and it's relied on a lot of volunteers, committee folks, and I think that leads to what your concern is sometimes it just took forever. Yeah. And there was always some debate about which tool do we use. Yeah. So we have to have a little more guidance, I think, to have staff focus on how they're going to use this. And there's no blame on anybody that worked on it, because everybody volunteered and gave a lot of effort and all to get that going and get that moving. But I don't think if we don't have, I think it would take somebody, not necessarily full-time, but a good portion of their time dedicated to getting this organized and getting in place so we know where we're going and can help guide us through the process.
I guess I take a slightly different perspective, which is that I think the program was a great success. Yeah. We actually did purchase a number of vitally important properties. We made some real impacts. I look at Neckaland Road and the Gilly property, and the fact that that really can't withstand. Shouldn't have been developed as much as it has been already, and we managed to take 50 homes off the rolls there, and protect an important piece of farmland. So we did a number of good things there. We've got. I think yes, we want to have a very clear set of criteria that we utilize, but we also have to recognize that these are one-off deals, and you have to have the availability of that whole range of options available in front of you, so that if one thing doesn't work for somebody, well, then there's another way to do it. And we have purchased properties, and we've been able to turn around and sell those properties with the restrictions that you can't develop them intensively and recoup most of the investment that we made. And so in some cases, that's really a great way to go. In other cases, it's no, the person's not interested in leaving the property. They want to just keep it as it is, and that's what we want them to do too. And so buying a conservation easement's a good investment there. But it really is the kind of thing where we can't. I don't think we can get too hung up on the question of exactly. Are we sure that every single piece of property is the right one to get? We have to make those decisions as they come along. I think because not every piece of property is going to be something that comes in front of us, and we can't expect that we're going to have a plan that says, well, we want to acquire all these pieces, and then half the people are not interested in participating, which is their right, and that's all fine and good. But when I think 20 some years ago, when I first ran for the board, I think Mr. Everson said to me, why don't you just go ahead and propose taking every single piece of property that's not developed now and buying it for the county? It would cost you $90 million, which was equal to a year's budget at that point. And you know what? Most people I talked to said they would have happily doubled their taxes for the year in order to take all that property out of development. Now you couldn't buy that for $90 million. And the fact of the matter is that if we don't have resources available now, we're going to wind up paying more for them later on. So, just some things to keep in mind as we go through these.
And just coming back to your point of the staff, I think we can come back and come up with some kind of thing. If you have areas of interest, roads in particular, that help us develop priorities, we can develop some priorities and how we would go through that. And maybe it's a conservation easement here and the purchase of property there, and let us bring that back to further discussion. I think we've got enough from you. But if you have specific areas of interest, knowing those areas in the next couple of weeks would help us, and while we're developing the priorities to bring back to the board as a whole. And please let me be clear. To your point, Dr. McGlennon, I absolutely think that the purchase of development rights name probably changed the discussion, right? Because it doesn't talk about preserving view sheds. It talks about purchase of development rights. So I was almost coming at it from the different angle, not setting a criteria. If you have X, Y, and Z, we're going to buy your piece of property or buy a conservation easement. But it's not just about purchasing development rights. It's about preserving view sheds or preserving farmland. There are other things that can be accomplished with it rather than just the purchase of development rights. So I 100% agree. Okay. Before you move to the next item, would you mind taking about a 5-minute recess?
5 minutes.
And we'll be back and ready to go on the
Yes, sir.
piece.
We'll pick up. Set communications, Mr. Statement.
Chairman of the Board, just a few comments on, I guess, a little history, not a whole lot, but as you probably remember, prior to September 2017, you had a communications department. It had a director, a communications specialist, a video production crew of 3 employees, and a community engagement person. And today we have the same number of positions. Currently 2 of them are vacant, or at least one's vacant, one may be. But during that time where that director left, we sort of dispersed our communication staff. And I don't think that's a bad. I've been here, I guess, going on 4 months now. And so for me, I don't think that's a mistake to have them dispersed. And then where they are, you created a PIO position, eliminated the director's position, moved the video staff to work for IRM, your community engagement person moved to human resources, and we have a communication specialist who we hired someone who stayed about 9 months, and then we've left that position vacant for maybe 6 to 12 months at this point. It's been vacant for a period of time. And so I think from a staffing standpoint, you're similarly staffed to what you were. From an organizational standpoint, a little different. I do think in terms of our communication with the public, we've done it prior to September 17, similar to what we're doing today in terms of running it through one person in terms of distributing the information to the community and having that interface. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Tourism has their own Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts. We still maintain our website with information resource management. The departments have a presence there. We haven't allowed departments to have their own Facebook accounts and own real access to those kinds of things. And I think we do have a group talking about that. Renee's been talking with representatives from all departments trying to see, is that something? And we're one of probably few localities who's kept a pretty hard rein on the Facebook and that communication space. So I think you'll see some changing things going forward as they talk through that and trying to make sure that our messaging, one, is still similar and good high quality, and that we're watching content of those websites. It just takes some pretty good oversight of that. Our video production crew, again, is still doing very good work. They're getting a lot of awards. It's just keeping some of the other thoughts and prioritization. I think we can do that from the administration side. I do think as you get into the PIO model, very common, and as we get into getting our staffing up, I think we can do a little better of being more proactive. I think we're doing a decent job of managing communications. What I shared with Ms. Larson one day when she had asked sort of where I thought is, I do think we can do a little better in terms of being out in front of some things, of trying to message ourselves better. But some of that has really been related to being short-staffed on our side a little bit, that we just haven't recruited those positions and filled those. So I think going forward, you really do want to fill the vacancies. I want to make sure that we are focused in the areas that make sense, and but I'm not unhappy with where we are. And so any concerns you have with communications, we're happy to try to address to your staff. I do think from information sharing, news releases, emergency press release, those kinds of things, when we have an emergency in this community, I think things are going very well in that day to day. I think our podcasts are seen and people following those kinds of things. I think better use of all of those kind of social media models work for some, and then development of flyers and other information counts as well. Right? Social media is a great tool, but it's not the only tool, right? There are a lot of other avenues that people use to communicate and receive information as well. So really that's it in terms of where we've been, a short summary, and where we are and where I see us going other than get back to full staff. I don't feel that it being dispersed is a bad thing for James City County. We all look to organizational things, particularly small departments. Are there ways to do them better and more efficiently? And I don't feel like you're in a bad place with that. I just think not having full staff, we haven't taken, I guess, advantage of what we had in the past of those 6 filled positions, where today we've been short for a period of time. Things you want to see different from us in a communications aspect, or things we're missing that concern you?
I just wanted an update to see where we were since the change. So I appreciate the update and appreciate the work that has been getting done in there. So, yeah.
I think they do a great job.
They do absolutely do a great job, and they do such a great job that I'd just like to see citizens have an opportunity to learn more about the county because of the effective way that they can communicate.
Well, I think some of that is, again, not having that extra position or two that we've been vacant for a period of time. But Jason and I talked about that, and Renee about the idea of filling that. And we three believe there's a need for that on the communication specialists, and we'll move forward with getting that person in place as well.
Sounds good. Questions? Okay. All right. Now we are ready for our 4th item, update on the Greater Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance. Ms. Larson.
Sure. Well, I can kick us off. I think Scott's going to jump in as well to let you know that So I think it came up earlier today, perhaps in one of the conversations, and it is now. There is a business council and a tourism council. Now, the business, we've recently undergone bylaws for the alliance, which would be Senate Bill 942. There is going to be a board of, I believe, 9 people, and that is that's going to be over the business council side and the tourism council side. That those bylaws have recently been done. Wasn't 100% agreement on everything that was in those bylaws, but there was lots of going back and forth. Mr. Kinsman was a big help as well. And so those bylaws have recently been approved. And so now the Business Council is working on their bylaws, and the Tourism Council is working on their bylaws. And once that happens, then that 9-member board will form and will start meeting. Right now, there is still the almost 30-member board that I am representing us on, and that is still meeting. But we're getting there. On the Tourism Council side, the good news is that we had an initial deposit of around $4.3 million for our first deposit. And then last week, we got our second deposit, which covered November, which was in the amount of $991,754.14. So that was for November. So we are in the process of developing some financial procedures. We have a gentleman who is a former comptroller. He's retired, who is working with Jody Puckett to develop some financial processes for us. We do know that one hire that we are going to need to make is a CFO, because it's an incredible amount of taxpayer money. And so, but the thought right now is to hold off until we have the executive director on board for the Tourism Council side. And that search is currently going on. It did get pushed a little bit because of the holidays, but hopefully we will have the people that are going to be interviewed, that hopefully that list will be out, and not I don't think that will be public, but the council will be aware of that list around the 1st of February. So hopefully we will have somebody on board March timeframe, and we hope one of their first hires will be a CFO, and because that is needed. We had our marketing people come down, and I don't know if any of you saw that in the newspaper, where we got our first look at the marketing plan for next year. We are a little behind just because of the process of setting up the Tourism Council. So the buys were a little late, but they've got a whole plan out. They are going to do a little tweaks. They did receive some feedback from the Tourism Council that possibly not everybody was that crazy about some of the parts of the plan. Though I do want to point out that they just don't go out and make up a plan. They do all types of marketing research. I mean, these are professionals from New York City that do this for a living, and New York City. They have data. There's a reason they choose certain people to go after, and they know who the decision makers are in families and what they want to see for their family on vacation, and so that is where the marketing plan came from. But when WADMAC was in existence, WADMAC had a group that they would run the marketing plan by and get feedback. And we didn't have that initially because it was, and I was one of the people who said something about the group. The group was very large. I wasn't sure that it was diverse enough. So they have decided, Jody and Dave Potter have decided that they are going to put together a group that they have smaller, and they're going to the marketing people are coming back. They're going to run some tweaks through this group, and Laura Messer is representing the county on that group, and so then but they'll be moving ahead with the marketing plan. Couple things that we did at our last meeting. We put money aside into a operating reserve account. This is because there have to be buys that are made towards the end of the year, so we don't get into the same situation that we got into this year. So we can just keep moving. Even I'm doing a lot with my hands today. Sorry. It's like I'm an airline stewardess or something.
Can I get some peanuts?
Yes, right after I finish. So that we make sure that we have the money there to continue with the buys. And so we're ready to go and don't lose any time. The other thing that we did was to take the maintenance of effort money on the 3 locality side and put that into a development fund or we hope that money is not there yet. So when that money gets in there, that it will be in a development fund versus going into the marketing side, with hope of future product. And what that looks like will have to be discussed among the 3 localities, but just to start there. Can I answer any questions so far?
I got a couple.
Okay.
When we started this, and I sat through, with you guys, with one of the first organizational meetings, and I know there were a lot of people around the table. But I believe that the Tourism Council itself, by the law, is set up with 9 members.
Because that may be it seems like there's more than.
Well, because I was looking at the documents that we were working from when we did this, and it says Virginia Code 58.16032 E2, member 1 representative from each of the following: James City County Board of Supervisors, Williamsburg City Council, York County Board of Supervisors, and then there were 6 others: Colonial Williamsburg, Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, Busch Gardens, Historic Jamestown, Williamsburg Hotel Motel, and Williamsburg Restaurant.
Okay.
So those were the 9.
All right. It seems like a lot more people around that table, but
you probably do, because you got probably lots of assistants.
Yeah.
But those are the actual voting members, I believe, of the council. And then this was a set of bylaws that was drafted up by that process we went through. That was dated July 30th, and it also specified that there was going to be a public policy and finance committee, which would handle certain things related to budgeting and everything, and that one required 2 members, and that was where we had you as well as Michael, because and so what I was curious about is how this has evolved. Are these the bylaws that have been adopted, or have they been substantively changed?
So they are not the bylaws that have been adopted.
Okay.
There is now a bylaws committee, of which Mickey Shohan is the head of.
Okay.
And so they are in the process of doing. We don't have them yet. We had to wait until the Alliance bylaws were done. We've not, to be frank with you, the finance piece of it, we didn't have any money until just recently. We've gotten 2 deposits pretty quick together. There was a lot we had to do in order to get that money, and so I can find out the update on that from Mr. Wasmer and get
Okay.
back.
Well, you and I are going to meet with him anyway in a couple of days, Thursday.
Correct.
So
Yeah. Okay.
But as a follow-on, and of course I'll update the board on what we find on it. But what I was concerned about was making sure I didn't realize that these bylaws had not been adopted, and that if you've got a committee set up to look at them, I would hope at least that this is the basis from which they would at least start working, unless they're going to go back and scratch it and start all over again. I know that the 3 localities put a lot of effort into this, and if we don't get something that is fairly close to this, I think I'm going to be really upset. And I just got to say that right out front, because this was an opportunity where we are putting a lot of taxpayer money into an organization that needs oversight, and it needs oversight from the elected people in this community. If we don't do that, I think we're negligent. So that's my 2 bits on this, and I want to make sure that I get that out there to begin with.
And Mr. Arson, at least my understanding, and Ms. Larson, if I get off base in a place, you'll correct me, please. It took me a little while to figure out the alliances, the oversight with no staff.
Yeah.
But they are a board, and the board is 7 or 9, or they have 9 member board now?
9.
9.
And then the tourism council, as I heard, was going to be 9 members.
Yeah.
So that lease is in keeping there, and it is going to have 1 from each local government. So those 2 pieces are.
And there already is.
That's right. So your alliance bylaws are complete. The other 2 bylaws for the business council and the tourism council are in development.
Okay.
I do think they'll mimic a lot of that. I think they'll have to take that into consideration. But I think you'll have a good tourism oversight of the tourism money. It's just that maintenance of effort money that trying to fence that into a place. So if we're still paying that,
and that's what I was going to come back to. The maintenance of effort money is essentially what the county puts in, separate from any of this tourism money. And so I'm sort of encouraged that sounds like you're trying to put that into a place where there can be some accountability and get some measurable product out of it, as opposed to taking taxpayer money and just shoveling it into the budget without regard to where it goes.
It be marketing. But I was pleased to see from a staffing side, the Alliance doesn't have any staff.
Yeah.
So that for me was a plus, because I was worried they might. The directors today with Jody and Terry, I think, are both very competent people. I've talked to them a number of times. We're going to have to work over time, I think, to build that trust feeling and understand that what they're doing is right. But I believe they're working in the community's best interest today. They're certainly sharing information, which has been really nice.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you just said? That the Alliance itself has no staff. So how, as a staff, because originally I think the idea was that the staff would be a shared staff between the 2 sides.
There are shared positions.
Okay.
Between the 2. I mean, tourism has their staff, which there's not been any added tourism staff. In fact, there's a few positions that are open.
Okay.
There have been, but they just simply, the staff members that were in the chamber tourism alliance, they've just gone over to the tourism side now.
Okay.
And then the business has their own. Now, of course, most of the staff is on the tourism side. But we have Jody Puckett there, who's contracted. She's the administrator. Dave Potter, who was with WADMAC, is doing the marketing. And then Jody, and then we have over on the business side, since Karen Reardon left, there is Terry Benez, who is their interim director, but she's there for a year.
Okay.
So, but there are some positions that are going to be shared positions. Okay. Well, possibly.
I knew that was.
But in terms of being paid, they'll either be paid out of the business council side or the tourism council side. The Alliance itself doesn't have an employee.
Okay.
Correct?
Right. No.
They have their board, and there is some auditing and some cost associated with the Alliance, but they're less than $200,000 associated with the Alliance.
Have they, as part of this bylaws adoption, you say the bylaws for the overarching group has been adopted. Are a copy of those available for us?
There is.
Okay.
We can get this.
If you just a link online or whatever, just to make sure.
If we haven't sent them, we will. We might have already sent them, but I'll verify that.
I'd appreciate that.
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. it's not been the easiest of processes. And, I appreciate, I have to, Doug Pons and Jeff Wassmer on, both stood with me over the amount of money going to a development fund rather than in marketing. And marketing is very important. Even with this new influx of money, we are not up to where some of our competitors are in our region, even for what is being put into marketing. They simply have states that put much more money into tourism efforts than Virginia does. And so, I understand why not everybody on the Tourism Council was thrilled to be taking that money and putting it into a development fund. But, I just said, if we're not doing that, I'm going to have to go back to my board, because I think that is what we're looking to do is to develop infrastructure versus.
I would comment on the thing that a lot of other areas put a lot more money into it. I wouldn't argue with that at all. I wouldn't disagree. However, I would offer that they probably get the money from a whole different source than we do.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm not disagreeing with that.
There's a lot of emphasis on tourism, and a lot of that is state money.
Yeah, exactly.
And when we are taking local tax money and funding this, as opposed to taking it out of state money, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but I just was trying to explain why the angst was to take that type of money away from possible marketing, because, we still, that puts us a little behind.
So you have set aside that money in what you call a...
Yeah, now it's set aside, but there's... right now, there's no money.
Okay, well, I know, but so it's a set aside of something that hadn't arrived yet.
Correct.
Okay, but the concept, has it been pretty well agreed as to what the concept would be and how that money is to be utilized?
Well, not yet, because I think that's a conversation that the 3 locality boards will have to have through their administrators. And certainly at this board table, but also, that's something that the CAs will be a conversation that they are meeting, continuing to talk all the time. And so, yeah.
Okay. You answered my questions. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So a little question about the marketing funds that are available now. Can we assume that the amount of marketing funds for the region, for our region, are increasing roughly by the amount of the new tax revenue? Or
well, so for next year, our budget is $8 million, which is probably a little low, but we. And I apologize, I can't think off the top of my head how much of that is marketing, but it's a huge. But we went a little low just because we were not sure when the budget was developed. We hadn't gotten our first monies from the Commonwealth, so we did not know what that was going to look like. But I can find out exactly how much is going in marketing.
And is everybody else maintaining effort?
As far as
advertising?
That's a good question, and not one that has been shared. So Busch Gardens has not shared with us if they're continuing their same level. And I've heard there has been rumors that Colonial Williamsburg cut their budget, but nobody has come to the table and said that. So.
Yeah, I guess I think that's something that I'd like to know, because if we're assuming that this money is supposed to drive additional interest in visiting the area, and there is not really the kind of heft behind the marketing budget that would be accounted for by that tax money.
Sure. I agree with you 100%. I think
I'm not, obviously you're not making these decisions.
Right. To me, this is money in addition to what I would hope that others were investing them into the effort themselves. But I don't know that I can find that out, but I can try.
Well, certainly it would seem to me that it's reasonable to ask the organizations, not to tell us how much they're spending, but whether
did they keep it level?
Whether they are still funding at the same level or more.
Okay.
Or less.
Yeah. I can try to find that out.
One of the other questions I had was, with our appointment of folks to boards, you are our appointee to the Tourism Council. You are also our appointee to the Chamber. Now,
Correct.
is that going to change with this chamber bylaws? Or do we have locality representatives as members on that chamber board?
So I believe in the initial, the chair, which is the former mayor, Jean Zeidler, when she talked at our last meeting, there were still those positions in the business council. There were some that did not feel that they should be that specific, that, certain, it shouldn't necessarily say, well, there must be a representative from here, I did let her know afterwards that I felt it was very important that the localities still maintained their seat, given the amount of not just on the tourism side, but on the business side as well. There's an expectation of support from the localities.
I would make that point exactly the way you did, that if they're expecting us to continue that level of support outside of the tourism money, and we don't have a seat at the table as on that overall board, that would be an untenable position.
Yeah, that's the business council that I'm speaking of.
No, I'm not talking about business council. I'm talking about the overall
So
chamber.
the overall board are 3 members from the tourism council. So there will be at least 1 to 2 elected officials, but it's not 3 elected officials. It's so it could be Mr. Pons and Mr. Wassmer, it could be Mr. Pons and me, it could be, and then it would be one of the other 9 people. So I'm sorry, I was speaking to the business side as well. But
so what they're thinking about the overarching level for the chamber?
It's 3 representatives from the tourism council,
3 from the business council, and 3 from
3 at large.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You could be cut out for a year.
You could be cut out completely.
And you're funding it.
And we're funding it.
Yeah, what do you want to do about that?
I will tell you, I'm not sure that there is appreciation for the, and I'm not talking about anybody specifically on the Alliance side, maybe just overall in membership. I don't know that there is yet the appreciation for the amount of public monies that are going into the organization.
It's a huge percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think all
But
3
it's
ought to be
also,
represented.
remember that it's, localities each have 1 vote. And it's almost a 30-plus member organization that decided the bylaws. So it's you're outvoted. So
Take the taxpayers' money and run.
But you know, get blamed.
Yeah.
But I do think they've tried to come, maybe met in the middle, but they've come closer to trying to be reasonable, at least on the tourism side, in terms of setting up the alliance with the oversight of those 2 other boards. The bulk of the decisions in funding, I believe, will still be with the tourism side, and then the business side of that level that they have funding. Very little funding authority will be up the alliance, although they're the oversight board.
No, I understand.
There won't be a whole lot of money that they really move around separate from what the business council or tourism council recommend.
Yeah.
Yeah, yet.
But now, if you want to take a look at it, though, we have representation on the business on the tourism council where there is taxpayer money being expended.
Yes, sir.
If we send taxpayer money into the chamber itself, if any of that money, I would say first of all, we don't have any representation on the business council.
yes.
All right. The question,
Will or don't?
No, you will. That's the piece that I was speaking to. That they, when the bylaws for the business council were talked about recently, what the chair said was that she had put those specific positions in, and there was some around the table that felt as though it should not be specified that way. I shared with her that I thought that that James City County should still have a seat on the business council.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
which is either on a business council or on the overall arching board. I guess if the overall alliance board, it's just minimal staff or whatever.
And we did make headway there too, because at first it was one elected official, I believe, and so we did get two.
And that's a 3-member board?
It's nine.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
but 3 from the Tourism Council.
Oh, gotcha.
So
right.
2 of the 3 being elected.
See, what's crazy to me is the only necks that are on the line are sitting in this room and all the other board members and council members with this money. And to be basically told you may not have a seat on any of the boards. You have a seat on 2, you might not have a seat on the 3rd one. To me is ridiculous. Because at the end of the day, all our necks are on the noose, not theirs. And I think that's something that should be pushed, because we're responsible for this money. And this is not a couple of dollars. This is large money that can easily, if not watched, go to something that we may not want it to go to. Not that somebody's doing something illegal. They're just thinking, well, we should put it here. And we're the gatekeepers, and we need to make sure we hold that gate.
Yeah, now we do have representation on.
Right.
So,
the 2.
And frankly, this was the way SB 942 was set up. I mean, I hear you,
Yeah.
but this is all coming from language in the bill and how it was supposed to be looked after.
And I would say we do have to remember that, yes, this is money that's being collected in our jurisdiction, much of it from our citizens, but we don't collect it. We don't disperse it. It's the state that does. And I think it's important for us to remind everybody of that fact.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, John, but when it comes right down to how that money gets spent, we are at the table,
right?
And if the bylaws of the originally proposed bylaws that had that finance committee, there would be some significant responsibilities on the part of the electeds to oversee that financial disbursement. So, I understand the collection process is not local, but ultimately we're the ones responsible for how that gets spent.
Well, I do think there's more to play out and some more discussion. And Ms. Larson's, I think, really expressed your opinion in a very polite way through all of that.
Well, I want to thank you for bringing us up to date, and I look forward to having a meeting on Thursday with you.
I'll keep bringing you up to date. We do have
one other piece that the chamber could be involved in if we choose to, and we would like to, is moving towards GWP and the launch pad of separating those two. William and Mary has talked about more of a business incubator type situation and offered, hey, would the launch pad fit in with that? And we from the 3 localities think that makes a lot of sense. We've got some details to work through, but there does seem to make sense to put that into where those resources, and that leaves what do you do with GWP? I mentioned earlier not being part of the HR EDA, but I do think the GWP is important for us to participate in. And we CEOs are asking or recommending that the chamber be that person that does that we would enter into agreement with the chamber to host a one-person GWP staff, and then we'd be able to build off their branding. We'd have somebody there marketing the region with their branding as well, and I think we'd get a bigger play. And we wouldn't hire a director-level person, but we would hire a high-functioning person that can interact with business prospects and then get our OED staff involved, depending on what locality they're in. And we did meet with Terry Benez, the interim person there on the business council side, and Gene Zeidler talking about that. Would that make sense to the chamber? And they're amenable to that. So I think unless you have overreaching concerns, we'd have about the same amount of money we currently are paying for the launch pad and GWP, but we would have them separated and have, I think, more resource and staff support from the chamber side in terms of getting some value back for money we're already putting in is my hope. And I think as we go forward, you'll get more of that towards that effort that we should see a benefit to us. And I'll share more with you as we go forward with that, but at least that's the idea that we're floating today.
Okay, any other questions? Because we got about 8 minutes till we have to start the next one.
And they need about 5 minutes to change over video.
Question for Mr. Kinsman. This says we will call for an adjournment to the work session at 4 p.m. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So
Close for adjournment.
Okay, call for adjournment. We have a motion on the floor. Mr. Stevens?
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler?
Aye.
Mr. McGrennan?
Aye.
Mr. Grayson?
Aye.
Motion carried.